You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. Welcome back. Welcome back to Public Comment. This is the show where weekly we're talking about municipal politics in Detroit government. I am here of Detroit is Different, Khary Frazier, here with my co-host, Malachi of Bridge Detroit. Malachi, how you doing today?
Good morning. I'm feeling good. We got that winter frost starting now in the morning. I'm not excited about that, but
Oh, yeah, man.
this is where we are.
It is Michigan, my friend. Detroit, Michigan.
Don't forget.
Yeah, man, and we up and rolling. And as much as that's happening, it's going to be some of our neighbors here in Detroit, Michigan, that will have some other neighbors. I'm talking about some four-legged neighbors, some all types of things can happen right now, right?
Winged neighbors.
Yeah, and some buzzing neighbors because right now ducks, chickens, and bees have been greenlit to be in Detroit and kept for farmlands for food purposes. This is something that passed as an ordinance, and this is in your notebook as you talk about it. And we're going to break down a little bit of this. So, Councilmember James Tate really was one of the people at the lead of this, and this has been a discussion for over 10 years and probably even before then of, what people can do on their land and people getting more into urban ag and saying, definitely, we want to get some chickens here. We want to get some bees here. We want to get some ducks, and we want to expand what that could look like. So, council members voted 5-3 to adopt zoning and animal control ordinance changes Tuesday after nearly a decade of discussion on whether livestock belongs in Detroit. The ordinance changes apply to residents, urban farms, schools, restaurants, city agencies, and 4-H programs and educational nonprofits. Councilmember James Tate spearheaded the ordinance, arguing it would improve access to healthy food. Chickens can produce around 300 eggs per year. I mean, hey, I don't know anything about chicken production, but that's what's going down right now. So Detroiters need to have a license to keep animals and must have legal control of the property. The city can immediately suspend the license if public health threat is found. And then it's also like a variance of how many feet this can be away from other neighbors and things like that. And also, if you do not keep up with this, you will get a misdemeanor. And obviously, the cleanup of manure and other things must be kept too. Keep Growing Detroit estimates that there will be, that there are 2,300 urban farms and gardens throughout the city. So, of that, I know many are looking forward to taking advantage of this. With that being said, Malachi, what was the talk at council about this whole ordinance? As this has kind of been brewing for a while now and picking up in that discussion.
Yeah. So before I got here, 2013, the city with Council President Pro Tem James Tate had been working on an ordinance and actually ended up passing an ordinance related to urban farming and gardening. And at the time, they were talking about allowing goats and sheep and other types of livestock. City officials ended up saying, let's separate that out. Let's take some time. Let's kind of think about what kind of livestock we want and have a whole kind of separate conversation based around that. So that's kind of what's been happening for the last 10 years since then. And now we've seen the culmination of that. It's only for chicken, ducks, and honeybees. I think there was some concern about goats and pigs and other animals being included in this. So that was ended up being kind of taken out. And we're starting with just a few of those animals. And, we're going to see how it goes. I think there's some interest in adding additional types of livestock. I think looking at these ordinances, there was some concern. Vast majority of people that called in to, public comment, who attended meetings, who wrote letters to the city council on this, were in favor. I think there were some concerns about just general like hygiene and, what would this be like to live next to chickens and ducks and bees? Like, would it be a nuisance for people? There's a lot of different kind of protections and regulations that are written into the ordinance that are aimed at kind of preventing neighbors from having to deal with any kind of noise and waste in particular. There's a lot of regulation around how the animals are kept, like the storage of them, the sheltering of them, cleaning up waste and manure. making sure that there's no runoff into the stormwater system or adjacent properties, cleanliness guidelines. These are all licensed through the city. So there's, a process to collect diseased animals and make sure that people are licensed. What's interesting though is, there are some number, an unknown number, Tate has said, of people that are already keeping some animals in the city. I mean, I've seen on the east side, I've seen some chickens out and about.
Well, not to say too much about my neighborhood, but over here it definitely there are different what we would consider livestock. And even I've seen roosters in the city, and not just in the city, but like neighboring cities too. I mean, it's some.
Yeah.
I know as much as we don't like to act like it, it's some country folks over here in Detroit. Depending upon where you at. You know what I'm saying? It's
I think you can look at that and say, well, people are already doing it and it doesn't seem to be causing like a major problem. So maybe that's a win for this ordinance. I think you also could say, well, the city's not doing a job of regulating animals as is. So how are they going to
that
be able to enforce some of these new rules? I think that's where some of the
And
concern is
that's
also.
where Callaway even wrote said that as my neighborhood, and you see it all the time. It's like it's a whole colony of cats over here, which
Mhm.
actually is in certain ways good because cats keep away certain other things. But at the same time, there are so many cats in my neighborhood. The chances of coming to Detroit is different, and looking at and walking past maybe like 7 or 8 cats, probably high probability. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So um
And not just that too. I mean, she talked about groundhogs and rats and mice and other things like that too. I mean, she had and dogs, I think is kind of the
I
unspoken thing.
mean,
Like,
it's possum,
yeah.
it's rabbits, it's pheasants, it's definitely depending upon the neighborhood. There's actually deer not far from here as well.
Mhm.
So
There's deer down in Lafayette Park,
yeah,
which is
so
great. I mean, that's like close to downtown. But is that a separate thing from people keeping livestock on their properties? This kind of issue with like some wild pests and vermin. I don't, to be
I
honest, don't really see the
I
connection there. But
I kind of well, I think it just becomes that the more animals, the other animals, it's gonna attract certain things
yeah.
because, obviously, the what is it, the roosters and the fox and all of that. I mean, you're gonna
Yeah.
get me
Well,
like
there
going
was
back to
concern too that was spoken to, I think, by Councilmember Callaway about dogs getting loose and attacking chickens, and could this kind of spark arguments between neighbors when you have kind of animals? So I don't know. We're gonna see how this shakes out. I mean, like the city has said, there's probably a relatively small number of people who are going to take advantage of this, especially in the first couple of years, because there's so much that you have to do
yeah.
to get licensed. I mean,
That's what I would imagine. Yeah, it's not going to be like putting some tomatoes on your fence. This is
no.
probably like the cleaning and the how you keep this.
The shelters have to be a certain distance away from,
Yeah,
they have to be set back from the property, they have to be set back from the neighbor's house, they have to be a certain size, they have to have, enclosures on all sides, they have to have, ventilation, the food has to be stored a certain way.
and then
Uh,
chicken. If anybody ever been on a farm with chickens, keeping chickens is something. Like I mean, I remember I've seen it, and then also love boxing. So Roy Jones Jr. A lot of his training was chasing chickens. I mean, it's not the urban agriculture is not necessarily easy as is, but then when you add livestock to it, you're really getting into like, okay, you're committed. So I don't think that this is going to be something that everybody has. It's not going to be like an exotic pet or something,
no, I
which
think I think for the people that are interested in having urban gardens and farms, this is kind of like a logical next step for them. And we haven't even said it yet. This is all about producing food. You can't have these animals as just like pets. Like it has to be to
yeah.
produce eggs or honey or meat. I guess in terms of the
And
chicken or the
that's
ducks.
yeah, definitely.
And, they said chicken and ducks can produce around 300 eggs per year. So there's a lot of unspoken benefits that we haven't talked about, when it comes to like access to sustainable food systems and knowing where your food is coming from and giving people the option of, having food sustainability and not having to go spend like $3 on eggs at the grocery store. And, there's educational benefits that have been that have been purported as well. We're talking about educational kind of sustainability type of education that kids can do by visiting some of these farms. So I think there's a lot of like broader benefits that they're hoping to find when it comes to like nutrition and sustainability and improving kind of the food networks in the city.
So so that is that, and it's another reality. And with that, it's always talking something in policy. So Detroit City Council defines legislative agenda. And I thought that this was very interesting because the legislative agenda going to expect from Mayor Duggan about what his future plans are. Many people assume he's not going to run for mayor again. This definitely leads one hell of a ideas, and I think it spoke to a lot of what people are thinking in reference to city council, as many people have been coming up to me asking, what am I thinking about the local elections for next year, other than like right here on public comment, we plan on interviewing everybody running. I'm talking about city council to police commissioner across the board. If you're running in city office, we want you on public comment so that we can give you a platform to share what you're thinking about, why you're seeking public office, and also in what ways you want to engage with the public in that position and serve citizens. And this is one heck of an agenda, as that has been defined from a legislative lens. Speaking to it definitely shows that city council is aware of what a lot of people are talking about. How they're going to respond and the capacity to respond, that's the question. Malachi, how do you think? First off, let me just get your feedback from seeing that, because I look at it like, yeah, that's what people are talking about. What's your natural response when you were reading?
Yeah, I mean, I think these hit, the main things that we're talking about. I don't know if you would want to put them in order, but affordable housing, tax assessments, public safety, water infrastructure, equitable. I mean, these are the conversations that council has week to week. They have advanced some things on, to address some of these things. They've had, a lot of conversations around them. Certainly, I don't know. Maybe if I would add a sixth one, like public transportation, maybe should be on there. It's
Yeah,
interesting that there's not even
yeah.
really reference to that in any of these subcategories. Like maybe you could slide it into public safety or something like that.
Uh,
But yeah, I think, what I'd like to do is spend some time and actually kind of look back at this year and see what they have done that is slotted in here and get an idea of what is ahead. This is the final 2025 will be the final year of this version of the council to work on these issues. I think it's kind of interesting that this came out in November of 2024. It's kind of said to be the 2024 legislative agenda, but I think it came out of their annual legislative retreat that they do. Um, so, that makes sense. But there are going to be city elections next year. So we're going to have a whole new version of the council by, they'll be sworn in January of 2026. So yeah, they have basically a year to peel some of this stuff off. But I
well,
think these definitely represent like the top 5 issues in the city.
and while that's happening, I mean, it's already concurrent that I assume it looks as if we're going to have two of those members of city council that are going to be seeking a seat of mayor.
Right.
So campaigning and and executing your job in office, because campaigning is a job within itself. And many, I believe, also probably are seeking reelection or at least exploring reelection. I don't know if we have any council member that has stated that they don't plan on running for reelection. Are you aware of any of that info?
No, not at this point. I mean, it seems like everybody's going to take another shot at it. I guess another thing I'd probably flag too is there's no real reference to the reparations task force in here anywhere.
No, not at all. I definitely think that that's something that Lord knows. And we're going to talk a lot about that. And I like how you said that because we're going to do our year in, which kind of started where we really kept up our rhythm with public comment from that year in report last year. And it's like, okay, let's stay with this. And I like how you're saying like we can use this as the framework to see like where things slotted. And then even like the budget hearings, all of the work with Outlier Media, uh, and what was it, Data Driven Detroit. It was some solid information about the budget that came out last year and Bridge Detroit. You all put in some work big
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, it's time for us probably to take a look back at that. I mean, we covered all the budget hearings and we laid out pretty much everything that they were going to spend money on, and how much of that has happened and how much is left to be done is interesting. Another thing maybe I would bring up is there's not really much in here about recreation and kind of like youth programming.
I think it
Something they talk about a lot as well, but probably not as important as like affordable housing. So
I would say that like probably fits into like the public safety of the spaces and places,
yeah,
and
that's true.
hence that's where like I'm assuming that's what they said. And I mean that's actually one of the last things that you mentioned in the notebook this week about the reopening of the Coleman Young Recreation Center that people have been waiting for a while, and that was one of the beacons as we've been doing more work with Detroit is Different over at Joseph Walker Williams Center that is reopened. And shout out to Joseph Walker Williams Center and what they've been doing over there. It's good to see some of these spaces being reopened, providing access to recreation and then socialization and just centering things in community. So I'm definitely a big advocate seeing what that is and getting interactive with community. But that also runs concurrent with the block club ordinance as we were reviewing some of our most watched episodes this year. And that was one of the most watched episodes about the tragedy that happened after the shootings at one of the block clubs. They immediately go to like, now you need licensing. And it's been many public events shut down because it's no licensing. And back to the number one thing that I'm always going to speak to, what's the capacity for this stuff? What is the capacity for so much of, so many officers, so many people to verify and check on things, and what begins patrolling, hence strengthening those relationships where everything doesn't feel like it's a big brother relationship and more so like a community working together. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's what it is, but we need to avoid that becoming what it could become, I should say.
yeah, nothing else to say there. We're gonna keep our eye on the ball.
Yeah, so looking at this, I think sliding in, as you say, those legislative notes, one of the things that in the overassessed taxes is highlighted, but I do feel going to so many of the community meetings actually where we started And I met you with the Tell Us the Trade. People are still talking about overassessed taxes.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's
Like,
nothing really that's been done to address it. So, I mean, it's a
and
lingering issue because they haven't been made whole, right?
yeah, so it's like that is a big elephant in the room that will continue to be larger and larger and larger and larger, especially running concurrent with so many tax abatements that are given to these developments that happen in Detroit. You know what I'm saying? So it's money being people see money being spent, but they're not being paid back, and that is a tough question to answer for residents. I believe. I mean, for citizens that residents want. For That's a tough question to answer for politicians to citizens in that space because nothing can be done. Even though I do think that that is more of an executive question that even moves up the state legislator, which kind of goes into what's happening right now with the lame duck session in our state house right now. And do you think that any actions will be taken there? Hence, a lame duck session means basically a lot of people and members were voted out. So the state house will flip from being a Democratic majority house to a Republican house now. And it's a lot of actions kind of going on with that. Detroiter Joe Tate, that was leading, now is no longer the speaker. So with this lame duck session, until things transition at the top of the year, certain actions could be taken. Do you think that any actions could be taken right now to strengthen some of these actions that city council is looking to do, or would that possibly be something like rocking the boat a little too much?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really aware of any kind of tax changes that are being proposed. Earlier in the year, there was a request for the legislature to look at creating an amusement tax. I don't really see that as going to get pushed through in this lame duck session. But our colleagues over at Bridge, Michigan, that cover the legislature pretty extensively, have done a couple of kind of breakdowns and predictions on what's going to be included in the lame duck session. So you can go online and read some of that. Um, I think even beyond the repaying people, this segment on tax abatements or tax assessments talks about reducing the burden, and that just means cutting property taxes, right? And we've seen that happen the last couple of years. One mill or two will get shaved off um, in the budget, and by I think diverting some surplus money is how we've made that work before to replace the revenue loss from that. But the Citizens Research Council, which has done some analysis of tax breaks and abatements that are used for the downtown development authority, we've done some reporting on that. They have continually said that we need to reduce property taxes in the city, not just to like spur development, but to ease the burden on people who are living here. And so I think beyond repaying people for the overassessment, which is really, I mean, that's a huge issue. I'm not just like waving that away. But in terms of like what the council is doing, it seems to be really largely based around making sure the assessments are accurate moving forward. Right? They hired an independent assessment team to kind of review that. They've made some kind of minor changes to the board of review. Actually, I'm not sure if that independent assessment has come through yet. I know there was some concern with the Coalition for Property Tax Justice that some of those changes that the council has made to ensure that there's a third party independent evaluation of the assessments. I don't know, that's a lot of words. They were frustrated with how that had been going. There was a big deadline that was missed at the beginning of the year, so need to probably check back in on that. But it's really between making sure the assessments are accurate and reducing the overall tax burden on folks. And we have the power to do that here without really relying on the legislature. So I know there's some taxes that council would like to raise to maybe replace some of that revenue. If you created a tax on sporting venues and concerts and things like that, maybe you could make enough money off of that where you could drop the property millage by a significant amount, or do something else. But yeah, I'm not, to answer your question, I'm not really sure what's going to happen in lame duck on this issue, but there's people watching it. So
Yeah, And with that being said, thank you for rocking with us again with public comment. It's definitely going to be some more that we got to offer moving forward. Thank you so much, Malachi. Thank you so much for watching. And check out Detroit is Different. A lot of cool stuff coming this week. Baba Malik Yakini, me and Baba Malik, my original guest for Detroit is Different, are back talking again about process and building and developing and so much more than just what DBCFSN was, but just more so where Baba Malik is right now as he stepped down from that position. So that's Detroit is Different. Malachi, what's going on at Bridge Detroit?
BridgeDetroit.com is where we're at. We are a free nonprofit newsroom for the people. We will not charge you a paywall for any of our stuff. You can find our newsletters online. If you subscribe, they'll show up in your inbox pretty much every day now. Mine comes out on Wednesdays. It breaks down city council business, like all the stuff that we've been talking about here. We also do lots of community engagement events and are looking forward to the year starting to wind down. But we need your feedback to kind of decide what we're going to do to lay out our own, priorities for 2025, like the city council is. So yeah, I'm excited to cover some of these big races. The mayor is expected today to announce that he's not running for re-election, today being the 13th of November. So we're going to have probably a lot of conversations around like what was his legacy? What are people going to try to do coming in and replacing him and so on. So yeah, keep up with us on that. BridgeDetroit.com is where we're at. Thank you.
All right. Peace. Yeah. You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is Different in Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit.